how Jamaica taught me happiness. Because it's like, I've probably never had less, you know what I'm saying? But I have the most right now. You know what I'm saying? Like, I had houses and warehouses full of, music equipment, studios, microphones, people, 10s and 20s of people coming to work every day. Had a functioning planet, and supporting all of that, and so it wasn't, it was always fun, but eating good food and rest, and not working like a slave, and being able to, like, expand my mind, reading, teaching. I teach my son. And, and that's my main thing here in Jamaica. Was, there to raise my son. I talked about what brought me to Jamaica and this and that. And so, like, once my son was born, because I was, just getting out of school and this and that. So, I had my son. We were pregnant with my son probably about, 16 months into the relationship. My son was born a year later, so we have been together for over 2 years before my son was born. And so, once my, one of the things that held me down and knew that I was gonna have security is the $3,000. And then I had a lawsuit. I was involved in a $3,000 from the grants and the cost of school, right? Then I had also a lawsuit, that I had coming. So that was like really my security. It's not like I just jumped out there crazy, But the thing was, I could not get a job, So it was like, alright, I'll figure it out in Jamaica, Because I couldn't spend no more time trying to figure it out in America, Also, I don't want to get sidetracked, but I'll get back to that. But I was just gonna talk about my brother Ibrahim. He came to visit me in January, and he was he had came to visit, stayed with us. We had a great time. When I was going to school, I was, I talked about how I got a room. Yeah, the room was in my brother Ibrahim, Wakil Allah's cousin, which I didn't know at the time. But, renting a room while I'm going to school, me and him, became family. Like, they treated me like family. I treated them like family. It was a beautiful experience. And, actually I had rented an apartment prior, and when I went to school, I went back to that because I was living with a young lady. That's when I learned, like, never live with a woman. Like, the man has to, like, you gotta have your own crib. You can't have a woman, be living with a woman. Under no circumstances can a man live with a woman. Like, it has to be your house. You have to be the, provider of that house. And that's what Islam teaches, And it was like, I was trying to, pick the best parts and all of that. And, meet a young lady. It was like, anyway, so that's, when we broke up, it was her crib, and I had to find, get in the room real quick until I could find a place, because I found a house to rent to put the equipment. So that's how I met Ibrahim, my man who came out in January. My brother, and he had a good time. He enjoyed himself, and he travels a lot. He has a travel channel that he's doing. I'm gonna put a link, so you can click on and check him out. But he came to see me, and around that time, I was doing the studio thing, and it was hard for me to get a job. And what happened is, I was doing the studio thing, and I wanted to slow down when I got into the relationship with the shorty who, you know what I'm saying, who, I was, I call it bipolar, but, bipolar we moved in together, but in her house, and, like she was moving somewhere, I was moving somewhere. We moved in together, but it was in her name, lease, and the whole nine. That didn't work out, obviously. You know what I mean? And not surprisingly, but anyway, so I tell any of the young brothers, never, like bring her into your space if you want to bring her, but never live in her space. You know what I'm saying? But anyway, that's another story. So I tried to do the work thing, you know what I mean, and be legitimate, and I couldn't, like, for one, it was like I couldn't get a job, like, you know what I mean, to what you call it, like, to survive, to, like, you know what I mean, help out with the rent, you know what I mean. I was, helping out as I could, but it was like she was, the breadwinner, you know what I mean. I ain't even gonna front, but I couldn't keep a job because, like I said, with my record, I couldn't get a good job. You know what I mean? So I worked for, like, a temp agency. You know what I mean? Wasn't paying nothing. You know what I mean? At the end, you know what I mean? So I was like, so after that relationship, I took that job, tried to live the, like, regular life. You know what I mean? Like the cornball life. Now, I ain't gonna say cornball life, but like that. You know what I mean? I'm not ready. I don't want to live. You know what I mean? No more. It's like I focus on myself, you know what I mean? It's music, you know what I mean? It's helping me, you know what I mean, grow. I've grown in business. I'm working with artists, you know what I mean? So it's paying off. But at that time I was trying to do, satisfy her, husband and all that shit, you know what I mean? But it was like I couldn't, if I can't be a husband if I can't take care of that, all her needs, you know what I'm saying? And in the 5% nation of, within the supreme alphabet, they got the lesson of the father. The father is the nourisher and provider for the family, for the house. You know what I'm saying? So it was like I couldn't provide for her, you know what I mean? So, anyway, I left there, got got a room that I could afford, you know what I mean? Doing my thing, building up, and all of that. And so me and Ibrahim became good friends, and like family. He like a little brother to me, you know what I'm saying? That's my word, you know what I'm saying? But he had this some time too, you know what I'm saying? And he's a truck driver now. A lot of cats who did bids, they come home and do they drive trucks because it's like I said, when you come home, it's hard for you to get a job. Truck drivers don't, you know what I mean? They don't need, like, they don't check for a criminal record in the music business. So you know what I mean? So I've always been able to thrive in the music business. You know what I'm saying? But you know what I mean, and like I'm definitely not suited for truck driving. You know what I'm saying? So anyway, one time, me and him was working at the same place. I got the job and I put him on. You know what I mean? He got the job, and he was driving. Like I was working in the office, like in like that. It was Crystal's Dodge or Automotive or something like that on Route 22. You know what I mean? So I'm working there. I'm working in like the parts department where they get the parts and things for the Dodge, because they had Dodge, Toyota, and the different things. So I worked in the Dodge department in the parts department. So I would keep a log in a computer. I ran the computer of what is in stock and where it is and all of that. You know what I'm saying? And his job was driving a little red truck, you know what I mean, that had Crystal Dodge or Crystal, whatever, Crystal something, Auto Center. And he would deliver to different stores and stuff and different, for different clients. And they called us the same day, but one at a time. Called me and was like, hey, we got the resort back in the, the results. And came back. You got a criminal record. We gotta let you go. This and that. You was a good worker though. You know what I mean? They told Ibrahim the same thing. You know what I mean? So we right back at his mom's crib. Like what I'm saying? Like we got. You know what I mean? So like I said, a couple months later, I made a deal with and got a house and with the studio in. But it was like just this cycle of like you know what I mean? Like just like trying to like float, you know what I'm saying? I couldn't get a job to, you know what I'm saying, pay, you know what I mean, a grown man in his 30s, you know what I'm saying, like, for a comfortable life. You know what I'm saying? That's just basically it, you know what I'm saying? But anyway, alright, like I said, so I'm in Jamaica. My son is born, you know. It was like every day was getting hectic, you know what I'm saying? And like that $16,000, that I had, you know what I mean, in the bank to get me through and all of that. It was dwindling, you know what I'm saying? My son, you know what I mean, that first year, he was born in. I'm taking you to like he was born in, and he had been living for about a year. So now it's like okay. I was like, yo, it's getting thin. I gotta, you know what I mean, figure out something to do where, you know what I mean, like I could like. So I was gonna, come back, to the States, and I got in contact with my school and was like, yo, I need a job, because they're supposed to, how you go to school, they have a job placement program. Yo, it's like Rachel Devon, you know what I mean? Because I worked at that department a little bit too. I talked about in previous. So anyway, I knew everybody in the whole staff of the school. So I was like, yo, you know what I mean? I need something, you know what I mean? So she was like, yo, you need to stay where you at. Ain't nothing out here. You know what I'm saying? It was like, yo, I feel the same feeling right now that I felt then. You know what I'm saying? It was like, what? Yo, you know what I'm saying? But I was like, damn. So I'm trying to figure out, like, what can I do? You know what I'm saying? Because it's like, it just got real, you know what I'm saying? You got a kid and a woman you taking care of, and you know what I'm saying? I'm taking care of everything, you know what I mean, which I'm supposed to do, you know what I'm saying? She raising a child, you know what I mean? Like my son didn't eat any food for the first year. It was all breast. You know what I mean? Boy thick. I'll probably show some videos of him, you know what I mean? And boy, you know what I mean? Solid. But Jamaican people know, like, you know what I mean, that breast milk, you know what I mean, and like, it makes you different for the rest of your life. Solid, strong. You know what I mean? And that's why, you know what I mean, a lot of Americans are weak. You know what I'm saying? Because we getting, some chemical based, you know what I mean, diet so the women can get back to work and make money and you know what I mean? Yo, it's like the great thing about America is that you can make a lot of money. But the bad thing is you got to give up your soul for it. You know what I'm saying? And so in Jamaica, I didn't have to give up my soul. You know what I'm saying? I was like got in touch with the family. I was like, yo, I need to come back. You know what I'm saying? You know what I mean? Like to get a job. This is the plan. I was like, because like I said, my history is selling drugs and making music. That's what I do excel at. But I stopped selling drugs, you know what I'm saying, and living that negative life, you know what I'm saying. Also, I do music, but it was like the music shit is like you got a lot of money, then you don't have no money. Then you got a lot of money, then you don't got a lot of money, unless you got millions, you know what I mean. But it's like what they call a struggling artist, you know what I'm saying. But anyway, So now it's like, yo, I gotta figure out something like where I could, like have consistent money. And that's what, like, even when I was in a relationship, that's what I was trying to do, just have consistent money where it's safe money. Like, you get a check. This is what you get every month. And you know what I mean? And we can go half on the bills. So that's what I wanted to do. So I wanted to go back to the States, get a job doing anything. Like, I had the associate's degree, so I said, yo, I know I could at least, like, be a manager at Burger King or something, you know what I mean? So So, I'm running the plan by my pops, and he was like, yo, man, just stay out there, bro. You know what I'm saying? Take care of your son, raise your son, and I got you. You know? And, you know what I'm saying? And that's really, like, he's been the foundation, you know what I'm saying? Of, like, someone that I can, fall back on here, you know what I'm saying? And, and focus on my son. That's why I focus on my son, because my pops, you know what I'm saying? He told me, we'll sort it out, bro. Raise your son, And, so that's what I'm doing, man. That's what I'm doing. And it's there because my son was like, Daddy, what do you do? And I said, yo, I raised you, man. He looked at me and ran to me and gave me a big hug. And, that's what my life is about, That's what I'm happy. I've never been so happy in my life. And I couldn't do that in America. I'd have to work hard, long hours for the house that I paid for. And send him 8 hours a day to a weirdo. And just get reports of whether he's doing well or not. So my son was taught by his mother, his first teacher. She taught him how to read. All the teachers say he's an excellent reader. Excellent comprehension. I taught him math and arithmetic. And I'm blessed for that. I'm blessed for that. And I thank my family for, supporting me in this endeavor, It wasn't within the, last couple of years that, I really started getting on my feet financially, Like, it wasn't like I was, kicked back, like, living in a bed, one time I was living in a board house, with someone else on the other side of the house. I've slept, on concrete floors on the beach. Not on the beach, but, on Jamaica steps. But I knew I was going to make it happen. And fortunately for the, permission of the law and the blessing of the law, that, growing financially, maybe, once my son started like walking and all of that, because I just stopped doing music, everything, especially when my son, when my son and his mother separated, I was taking care, I had him full time, I've had him full time since, because, she tried to, but it was like, she had to move out and move, things got rough for her, and, things was already rough for me, and so it was like, it was more, better for me to take care of him, full time, have him full time, and I just thank Allah for that, because that's the greatest thing that I've ever done, it's the greatest thing I've ever done, and the greatest gift that my father gave me besides life was the opportunity to raise my son. I was telling the God Divine Element the other day, I feel like Master Fard's father, you know. You know, he said that Master Fard, you know, taught Master Fard, you know, the Islam that's older than the sun, moon, and stars, older than the Prophet Muhammad, the Islam that the Honorable Elijah Muhammad taught. Well, that Master Fard, his father, taught him as a child, raised him up to go find his lost brothers and sisters, black nation, the lost found nation living in America. And he taught his son, and he prepared his son to come amongst black people in America and teach them. But how he prepared at first for the plan, he got a good woman. He found a white woman, a righteous woman, not just any old white woman, but a white woman who knew who she was and who the original people are. And he gave birth to a white-looking child that could pass as white, coming into America to come find the lost found black, his lost found uncles, right? Because he was a white person, so we, the original people, would be his uncles. And taught the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, you know. And that's what I've been able to do, is to raise my son and instill in him not the virtues of getting a job, and, you know, but the virtues of saving his people and creating opportunity for black people worldwide. You know, I'm not an American, I'm a black man. He's not Jamaican, he's a black man. Jamaica is just one step in his lineage, in the stop. Right? Just like America is just one stop in my lineage. And it's the same people. When you come to Jamaica, you're gonna see somebody that look just like, you know what I'm saying, your cousin, your brother, you know what I mean? Like, you know what I mean? We are all the same people and have the same beginning. And we have to teach the babies that, because they're not gonna learn that in school. They're learning how to be bad bitches and gangsters, you know? And I must say, yo, I ain't gonna lie, like, I always ask God, you know what I mean, to, you know, guide my tongue. And yo, I ain't gonna front. I just be coming in here talking, like I got notes and everything of what I want to say, but it's not confounded. It's just a topic, and I did not expect to say, you know what I mean, even to go into that story. You know what I mean? Word up. I was talking about, you know, how Jamaica made me happy, you know what I'm saying? But, you know, this is therapy for me, you know? I mean, and also it's like, you know, it's like media training, and, you know, I'm rebellious, so people said I couldn't do it and I shouldn't do it, and I'm doing it. You know what I'm saying? I can't say no more than that, though, about how Jamaicans made me happy. You know what I'm saying? That's my word. That's how Jamaica made me happy, you know. You know, I'm the luckiest man in the world, you know. I'm the happiest man in the world. And, you know, once, like, you know, the appropriate time we're gonna leave here, you know what I mean? But I'm not going back to America. I make my money in America and I'm out. Next stop, maybe, Belize, Panama. Where there's black people. Wherever there's black people, I want to see. And then, eventually we're gonna be out. Kenya, more like the eastern, like the area of like South Africa and up. Zimbabwe. Or we going up to Uganda. Zambia. All of that. I really don't like from Namibia and to the left. I don't really have no interest in that. But or I should say I have less interest in that. I go to America for that. But like South Africa and up, going up into Kenya, Sudan, Congo. Yeah. But that's enough on that tip. You know what I'm saying? But it was like
P Funk City G.